Mugello's Formula 1 debut wasn't meant to offer much of a race, but it was so dramatic that, as the race winner Lewis Hamilton put it, we almost had 3 in one afternoon. The big talking point during the Tuscan Grand Prix and afterwards was the massive start line accident at a safety car restart, which wiped out 4 cars on the spot and prompted 1 of 2 red flags. It was such a mess that 12 drivers were formally warned for their roles in causing the collision, with Alex Albon, Lance Stroll, Daniel Ricciardo, Sergio Perez, Lando Norris, Daniel Kvyat, Esteban Ocon, George Russell, Kevin Magnussen, Nicholas Latifi, Antonio Giovinazzi and Carlos Sainz Jr. all deemed to have played a part. In fact, the only drivers still in the race who didn't receive a warning were the top 3 at the time of Valtteri Bottas, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, and the bottom 3 of Romain Grosjean, Kimi Raikkonen and Sebastian Vettel. The stewards felt that the root cause of this incident was the inconsistent application of throttle and brake throughout the pack, and an extreme concertina effect which dramatically increased as it moved down the field. They don't really explain what happened, but we can do that for you after some painstaking review of the onboard footage from every offending driver and the 3 at the back that avoided the chaos. Before we reveal our findings, why not hit the subscribe button if you haven't already for more deep dives into F1's biggest talking points like this one. Now, what really happened in a crash caused by 12 drivers? The Troublemakers Part 1. The first offender was Albon, who at the restart led Stroll, Ricciardo, Perez, Norris, Kvyat, Ocon, Russell, Magnussen, Latifi, Giovinazzi and Sainz, with Grosjean, Raikkonen and Vettel at the back. Albon stayed pretty much tucked up behind the lead trio, positioned slightly to the left of Leclerc, and might have been guilty of the absolute tiniest of false starts, as he seemed to very briefly accelerate then decelerate. Behind him, Stroll had his own micro acceleration that became a full lift, though he was never dramatically behind Albon and certainly not accelerating and braking harshly. Ricciardo was the first driver to deviate and leave a significant gap to the car in front, and maintain that gap with small decelerations right up until the moment Bottas gunned it out front. This brought Perez right up under the rear wing of the Renault, so Perez had to get out of the throttle as well, and that forced Lando Norris into a constant pattern of speeding up and slowing down after exiting the final corner. This caught out Kvyat, who had left a major gap, bigger than Ricciardo's to Stroll, to accelerate into, but that just meant he had to get out of the throttle quite significantly, marking almost certainly the biggest deceleration of this leading group. And thus the knock-on effect got bigger. Ocon trailed Kvyat closely out of the final corner, used him as his reference point and went when Kvyat went, then had 2 or 3 big stop-start moments nearer to the lights. That in turn caused a problem for Russell, who had left his own gap to the cars in front and responded to their big acceleration by going to full throttle for a good 3 or 4 seconds, then had to brake quite significantly. The Troublemakers Part 2. Russell was the last car in this queue to get away with it. The proverbial butterfly at the front of the train had flapped its wings, and those at the back would now pay the price. Magnussen was quite close to Russell exiting the final corner and reacted quickly to Russell getting on the brakes, then got piled into for his troubles, and it wasn't the car directly behind Magnussen that assaulted him. Nicholas Latifi had kept extremely close on the exit of the final corner and just ducked left to shoot past Magnussen's slowing car after being on throttle for several seconds. Unfortunately, that left Giovinazzi blind to Magnussen until the very last moment, and as the Alfa Romeo driver admitted, he was completely flat out just before he slammed into the left rear of Magnussen and then cannoned into the slowing Latifi as well. Sainz, near the very back of this train, was then confronted with a wall of cars while at full throttle himself and could do nothing to avoid a sickening impact. Grosjean was a fortunate but furious bystander to that mess, having committed to following Sainz to the inside, which gave him enough of a view to the slowing Magnussen to provide a split second's advantage in getting on the brakes fractionally before it all kicked off. It also gave him enough time to immediately get on the radio and scream, "That was f***ing stupid from whoever was at the front. They want to kill us or what? F***ing hell. Whoever did that should be f***ing banned." The other variables that didn't help. 2 key factors from external sources contributed to these exceptional circumstances. The first was the safety car lights going out late. Bottas has to keep within 10 car lengths of the safety car until this point, which meant he had no chance to create a gap until after the final corner. Many drivers and at least one senior team figure believe the restart procedure is different this year, with the safety car turning its light off later than ever to give the leading car less time to build a gap before the restart. Bottas' teammate Hamilton and others believe this is a deliberate effort to invite more action, and that overstepped the mark at Mugello because it contributed to this crash. Bottas even said that Mercedes had raised the concern about this before the race, but it was brushed aside, and the drivers were backed up by multiple others including Ocon and Russell. but race director Michael Masi disputed this version of events, responding that it was no later than any other track. He, like the stewards, acknowledged the special circumstances of Mugello's layout, but said that was why drivers were advised very clearly in the briefing on Friday evening not to overtake the safety car before the safety car line at pit entry, and not to overtake each other until the pit lane exit. The exit as the control line, the point where racing can resume, is the second factor. With the safety car lights not going out until they approach the final corner, Bottas could not back up the field too early. If he'd accelerated as soon as he was clear of the safety car, he'd have given everyone behind a huge tow and almost certainly lost the lead on the long run to turn 1. So Bottas waited and waited and waited. A few people pointed the finger his way for that and for what followed, but Bottas' pace was consistent and he wasn't being erratic. Yes, the field was bunching up more as the drivers behind sought to avoid getting caught on their heels, but the real problem occurred because of those who had raced to fill the gaps they deliberately left and the extreme concertina effect it triggered. That can be seen by how much the midfield pack condenses from their entry to the final corner right to the start-finish line, while the more sensible Raikkonen gave himself the freedom of Tuscany to react to the madness in front, and even he had to take evasive action as he entered a sea of smoke, broken parts and stricken cars. Bottas, quite rightly, was completely exonerated by the stewards, and he even had the support of multiple other drivers, including Hamilton. How it helped Mugello make its mark. All the fears pre-weekend were that high-speed undulating Mugello would be a brilliant driver's challenge but then trigger a dull race. It was considered a worthwhile trade, given it's just a novelty event in an extraordinary season. But it actually produced an engaging race, brought alive by chaos that fortunately everyone escaped from unharmed. Yes, there was only one overtaking spot and it was the scene of mostly DRS drive-bys, but the layout also contributed to the mayhem and had other strengths in its favour. A good race isn't just defined by how many overtakes there are. Mugello's long straight and wide open turn 1 invited an exciting start and was already jumbling the order before the free car crash that wiped out Max Verstappen and Pierre Gasly. The pit lane entry and start finish line position guaranteed pre-race that any safety car restart would be a big challenge, and if that hadn't happened we probably wouldn't be making this video. This track was also very punishing, just look at the spins and shunts we saw through practice, qualifying and the race. Lance Stroll's suspected puncture may well have been a result of the high stress put through the tyres, as Mugello produced Silverstone levels of load, if not more, given the high speed sections went on for longer. It was causing teams a real headache with tyre management and the physical wear was extreme. Essentially, Mugello helped prove the fact that a good F1 race is made up of many factors, and another Mercedes 1-2 was made more palatable by an engaging Grand Prix. But what do you make of its F1 race debut? Was it better than you thought or dependent on crashes that could have happened pretty much at any circuit? And what of that start line crash? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you liked this video and thought it explained a complicated crash well, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. F1's taking a weekend off before Sochi, but there'll be loads more to come from the race in the meantime.